Hey folks, it's Bear Gardner, and we are back in the Cards SOE bunker. This time it is just the two of us. I am not going to sing, you do not need to hear that. But I am joined this time for the next part in our review of the Homefront card reveals by CoreData. Core is down below me. Core, say hello to everyone and remind them who you are.
Hey guys, how's it going? CoreData here. So I'm a small-time cards content creator. Similarly to Bear, I do a lot of deck techs and stuff, as well as streaming whenever I have a free moment. You can find me over on Twitch or on YouTube at CoreData, normally uploading on Saturdays, primarily focusing on some brews and tier 2 decks, while occasionally covering meta stuff.
Yep, it's definitely worth a check. Plus, Core always has entertaining streams when he gets on there, especially if anyone plays Crossfire, which is going to follow him around for the rest of his Cards career, or until we get rid of the card. That's all right. Can't be any worse than some of the experiences we've had. So, as of recording, it is the 24th of November, which means we have had another 24 cards, some of which were actually revealed by me. We are into the back end of reveal season, so this should be one of only 2 more episodes that we're doing, in which we're going to go through the new cards, talk about what we think about them, whether we think they're good, bad, indifferent, or just very random. At the top, because there's been so much of it going around, we're not going to have a discussion in this about things like art sourcing. If that's your thing, especially since I've noticed a few people dropping it in the comments on these videos, I love you very much, but please don't. It's not something any of us are qualified to comment on, and that sort of thing should be taken to 1939 and dealt with there. We are not in a position, none of us have a connection with the art department. And, I mean, technically, some of you will know I technically am an artist, but I don't work with AI a lot, so we can't help you. But obviously, the Discord links, all of that down below, you can get in touch. But anyway, just a PSA so that you're not wasting time typing where you want to get an answer that we can't give you. Most of the rest of your questions we'll hop on and answer, at least I will, if I get time. It's been tight. First of all, huge thank you to Core for joining me yet again. He's been burning a lot of time on these videos with me, and there's still more to come. But we do indeed have new cards, and the first one is from Germany. So we are going to introduce ourselves to the 27 Fusiliers. 27 Fusiliers is a limited German infantry. It is 2 cost, 1 op cost. It is a 2/4 body. It has bond and shock, and it has an interesting piece of text which says when a German unit enters your hand, reduce its cost by 1 to a minimum of 1. And as it's becoming a habit by now, I am immediately PSA Bear. Enters your hand does indeed include if you draw it from your deck. If you draw a German unit from your deck while this is on the board, it will in fact reduce its cost. Right, hopefully that makes that fairly clear. It's not just cards you bounce back from somewhere else, it's just any German card that enters, any German unit card, I should say, that enters your hand by any means. But yeah, cool. What do you make of 27 Fusiliers? If nothing else, we seem to be learning a bit more about this whole throwing things in hand archetype.
Yeah, this is really, really powerful. Again, this is 2 cost, 2/4, 1 op. This is the stat line that 1939 slaps on a unit that they really, really want you to play for like archetypal stuff. Same with like the 4 cost, 3/4s, just or 3/6s also seeming to become the norm for that as well. As
Yeah,
like the archetypal payoff cards.
Yeah, it's like those anchor stats, isn't it? That's just enough body to hang around.
Yeah, also has shock on it, which is relevant. Shock is a very, very powerful keyword, particularly on a 2/4. This is threatening to potentially 3/1 an aggro deck by itself. So yeah, just keywords alone, very, very powerful. It does have bond, so it's in some cases going to be difficult to have like online on turn 2. However, if you're taking a proc of damage from this, I don't think you particularly care because that's a must kill unit because this is a ridiculous form of acceleration. The ability to just discount your hand for drawing cards and just playing the game in general. You don't even have to interact with this weird German self-bounce archetype. This is most likely just going to go in like the Germany even deck with like the jet prototype and the 4/5 that draws you a card at the end of turn. I think this is just good enough to see play as is. I don't think you even care about the Southbound synergy with this. Just drawing cards and reducing the cost of them is good enough, I think. So yeah, I think if this is going to see play anywhere, I don't think the Germany Southbound stuff is good enough. From everything we've seen so far, like the only good card from that entire package is Kettenkrad, which doesn't even synergize with that entire package. So I don't think we're going to see Germany Southbounds like make its way into the metagame at all. But I do think this just goes straight into like the Germany even cost deck. I think this thing is like crazy. We had an effect similar to this in Legends, actually. Whenever you draw a card on your turn, it would reduce the cost by 1. And it did nothing until it did like very broken things, and then they fixed the broken things and did nothing. So there's a chance that this does nothing. But this type of mana cheating is so powerful. I cannot confidently say whether it will if it will not see play, because I definitely think this is going to worm its way into a few lists.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go out on a limb, even though I don't know how powerful this card is gonna be. I am not the biggest fan of this card, just in its existence. It's another card that it is not nothing to note that this is a 2-drop, and we've talked before about War Machine and the fact that anything that's getting you that kind of resource acceleration on turn 2 into turn 3 has the potential to turn 3 into turn 4, and turn 4 or credit 4 is quite a pivotal breakpoint in Cards. It's where we see a step up in unit stats. It's where we see a step up in available effects. I think this is bordering on an auto-include in most German decks, if only because of its potential to accelerate your game. I think if you couldn't run US Ally with War Machine, this would actually be Germany's premier way of accelerating a deck. I think the only reason it might be limited in where we see it is that it's competing with War Machine, and I've spoken many times before about the fact that War Machine is a bit silly and a little bit too strong. And one thing I will say is that this is both a limited card, but also just mechanically, it is weaker than War Machine, because you can at least remove it, but you really want to remove this thing before it gets rolling, because just even without the and I'm going to call it the clown car German archetype at the moment, which I'm sorry, I don't get. It's bonkers, it's interesting. And honestly, if any nation was going to get a clown car bonkers interesting archetype this time around, I'm happy with it being Germany. But I don't think it's got much in the way going for it. Yes, I suppose technically this would be a part of it, but so far it feels like a long walk to a destination you could have gotten a cab to.
Yeah.
I think
I think this is going to share its fate with like Kettenkrad. I think this is going to go into everything except the deck it was designed for.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. But no, it's certainly interesting. And moving on to another German unit. This time it's tank. It is another limited unit. This is the Panzer 4J. Panzer 4J is a 6 cost, prick your ears up, 0 op cost, 4/5 tank with blitz, but it does say increase the operation cost by 1 each time this unit, I should say 1 after each time this unit attacks. So every time you attack, note attack, not move, with this unit, it will increase its operation cost by 1. It is very similar to the Zastora, which I have been on record as saying was one of the best value cards in the entire game, because if you did the maths on Zastora versus some of its other competition in particular decks at the time, it was just better in 90% of circumstances. This is a very interesting effect. I will also say it's a very cool piece of art. But Core, what are we making of the Panzer 4J?
Yeah, exactly what you said. Pretty much, this is if the restorer was a tank.
Yeah.
um, it's 6 cost, so like you are technically on the restorer, you're paying for the blitz technically, by the 2 credits, but also this is a limit. You can run 3 of these.
Yes, you
I think this
can.
is going to be a very solid mid-range unit. Honestly, maybe even play this in like Heinz as your top end. Maybe like you just drop 2 of them as your like end game win condition. 'Cause 0 up on a 4 or 5 tank is pretty big. This is yeah, but I think this is good. I just don't know how widely played it's going to be because it is expensive. 6 is expensive, but
Yeah.
like we've paid 6 credits for 4 blitz damage before, and it's being rotated. It's called Comet.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
while Comet can attack from the support line, this has 0 up, and it's like so you can't like it's just it. The thing tanks are powerful because they can operate and attack on the same turn. And this is like the 0 up on the tank is so relevant. It's very difficult to overstate how relevant this is. Also, if you're playing like a Germany mid-range deck, you're likely going to have some aircraft in your deck, and you're likely running some copies of suppression. So I wouldn't be surprised to see people suppressioning their own panzers once it's in the front line and already has attacked, because at that point you're just wiping away the op cost forever. Similarly to what people were doing with Restore at the time, it's less like self-contained with the Restorer thing because it's not an aircraft itself, but it is a line of play you can take. And frequently, what will happen is this will swing once or twice. Your opponent will then start ignoring it because it's got like 2 or 3 op cost. Or like, oh, my opponent's not going to operate. This is too expensive, and that's when you hit it with suppression and your opponent just dies. So I think this is a solid card. It's definitely going to I say that it's likely going to see a little bit of play in mid range. We just kind of have to wait and see how good this actually ends up being in practice, whether or not 6 is a little bit too slow or not. But I would be very unsurprised to see this, like, see a decent amount of play.
yeah, I will say though, and I have a comment on this. We talk about this, and we do talk, and you are correct, and I mostly agree with you, but I think you have to bear in mind the previous card, because this card at 5 borders on cracked. And if you have our previous friend, the Fusiliers, on board, this comes into your hand as a 5 cost 4/5 blitz tank with 0 op cost, which in effect means that this is 3 credits ahead of rate. Because obviously rate accounts for the operation, which would normally be at least 1. Actually, arguably on a 4/5 blitz tank, it might even be 2, which would put it, God forbid, 5 credits ahead of rate. I think this card is super strong. I think the only thing that is possibly going to affect how much we see it see play is that this isn't a direction that Germany routinely cares about recently.
Yeah.
Because Germany recently cares a lot more about hard control and burn. And this is, I mean, it's a nice thing to throw for a little bit of extra damage in a burn deck, let's not lie. Comet is leaving a gap, and this does sort of kind of semi-neatly fit that gap. But I think also this goes in the even cost deck, because it's even cost, which is in and of itself just fun. There's definitely an evens deck out there to be made, I think. It's hard, isn't it? I can't decide whether this is just a really good card or like bordering on cracked beyond belief. And I think it's going to be about the meta and where it sits, because I think if this has a good tier 1 deck to sit in, it suddenly becomes cracked beyond all belief.
Yeah, like the thing about this is it's a 4/5. This thing can very comfortable take trades as well. Like you can against control. This is why I'm saying like most likely going to see play in like some form of mid range, because versus control, this is a 0 up 4/5 that your opponent has to kill because it will very quickly kill them. And then versus other mid range aggro decks, this is just a 6 cost to remove a thing in the front line while also maintaining like a 4/3 body behind it. So like it's a good card. I don't know if its biggest problem is that it's a German card, and Germany is a nation full of great cards. So I just don't know if a good card is good enough.
Yeah, it's the thing, isn't it? Well, I mean, we continue with Germany as we move along, and once again, it is a German card, but this time it's countermeasures time, which is my favourite time. So this is Tactical Retreat. Tactical Retreat is a one-cost standard German countermeasure, and it says, when a friendly unit is attacked, send it to hand before damage. I have thoughts, but let's have cause first.
I think this card is garbage. You can't control it is like the big thing. If you were able to set up a scenario where you could like very easily control what was getting bounced, that'd be great. But that's not the world we live in. And even then, like this kind of delayed bounce is not great. And you still have to pay the cost to redeploy the thing that's being bounced. So a lot of times it's not even that great. You're saving a thing, it only saves it from being attacked. Your opponent can very easily just like swing a Brewster at whatever it is, and then like, okay, cool, I removed your thing for a single Brewster attack. That's a-okay with me. So yeah, I think this card is absolutely garbage. I think this is one of the worst self-bounce cards we've seen. Like compare this to Kettenkrad, and it's night and day. Kettenkrad is just Kettenkrad is just so good. I think this may be one of the worst cards of the set.
But Core, in Super Happy Christmas Land, you've got 2 or 3 copies of the Fusiliers on the board when this countermeasure goes off on your already op-costing... No, I can't do it. I'm sorry, this card is hot garbage. This is, I mean, countermeasures are questionable at the best of times because, as I've said endlessly, a good player will learn to play around the important ones and will play in a way to tank the crappy ones. And this is just bad. It's just so much squeeze, so little juice, and you don't even know what flavour the juice is before it comes out. Because there's the magical day when your opponent hits the target you want them to, but then there's the day when the first thing they do is attack into a unit that you desperately don't want anywhere near your hand, and then you've just wasted a credit and a card to make yourself worse off. Yeah, I'm sorry, Tactical Retreat. You're trying very hard, but I don't see this seeing play.
It's pretty much just an infinitely worse version of In the Navy, because at least In the Navy has the opportunity of just like forcing a really bad trade from the opponent when they're not expecting it. But this just completely resets your tempo and doesn't affect the opponent's board at all. So that's like the big thing. Countermeasures, you hold them up to affect your opponent's board 90% of the time. That's like what they're good at, is like representing some form of instant speed interaction for your opponent. But this is just 1 credit to set yourself back like 5 credits when it bounces something that you don't want bounced.
Yeah, this is a very expensive way to kill your own tempo. I'm not a fan. So I think we can safely move on, and we're going to move to Italy, but we're going to do this differently. What's going to happen here, because Italy has had what I would describe as a package delivered for this expansion, and instead of breaking down each individual card, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run you through, and we'll flash up on the screen each individual card, and then I'll try and make space on the screen so we can keep all the cards up or swap around as we're talking. But I think we kind of, unless Core disagrees, I think we have to talk about these collectively, because outside of the collective, these cards make basically no sense. So, we will begin with the RM Bersagliere. This is a 1-cost Italian Navy card. Yes, it's Navy. It is a boat. It's a ship. I know it's a ship. I'm just trying to annoy you. And this order, this 1-cost order, says, draw a card from your deck that did not start there. Give your HQ defense equal to its cost. Right. Before we hop forward, when it says that did not start there, that very specifically means a card that was not in your deck at the start of the game. You have to find a way to add something to your deck. You can't bounce something from the board back into your deck. It was there when the game started. You can't. It is literally, you have to effectively, as it were, conjure or summon something into your deck.
I do have a question.
Oh god.
How does this interact with converting things in your deck? So, for example, Semperfi.
Right, so the thing about convert, and I am not 100% sure, but I have tested a couple of on-board interactions about this. Convert does not, remove the existing unit. It just transforms it. So I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think this would affect the converted unit. But I'm not going to lie, this was not a big part of my testing palette. I had a bunch of other stuff that I was working on, some of which we might talk about later. And if any of the other IT guys who happens to know the answer, hit the comments and let us know. But off the top of my head, I am 60% sure the answer is no, but it is only 60%.
Yeah, it's difficult to know because when you convert if a thing is pinned and you convert it, the pin is removed because it's technically a new unit. But also at the same time, it's converting a card that it's taking the place of a card that was already in the deck. So
yeah,
that's what I was asking, because to me it's a 50-50 as to whether or not this interacts how I think it does.
Yeah, the reason I say it is 60% sure that it wouldn't work is specifically because of that convert interaction. Regardless of the fact that it resets, changes the stats, alters the description of the card, it's as if you just Tippexed the card and wrote a new set. It's still technically the same card. If you don't know what Tipex is, we're being a bit British, but you can go look it up. But this thing, anyway, before we go down a whole different hole, we move on to the 5th Bersaglieri. So this is the first of this package of units. This is a 4-cost, 2-op cost limited Italian infantry. It is a 5/6 guard with bond. That will be relevant in a moment. I want to talk about that. And it has destruction. Shuffle 18th Bersaglieri into your deck. Right. We're going to then move on to the 9th Bersaglieri. If you're sensing a theme, you're correct. The theme, by the way, is the Bersaglieri, which was an Italian motorized rapid deployment division in World War II, which is also where the theming of this particular idea goes. In the case of the 9th Bersaglieri, we have a 3-cost, 1-op cost special infantry. It is a 5/4 blitz body with bond. And it says, destruction, shuffle 18th Bersaglieri into your deck. Okay, I hear you cry. What is the 18th Bersaglieri? Let's find out. So 18th Bersaglieri is a token. You can't have these in your deck. It only happens when the other destruction effects trigger. And the 18th says is a 6-cost, 1-op cost, 6/8 blitz guard body with bond, which says deployment. Shuffle a 9th Bersaglieri into your deck. Right. I'm going to take you on the best illustrative journey that I have. Then I'm sure Core will have plenty to say, and this might be a long segment because this is not the simplest set of cards ever released. Let us assume that you play a 5th Bersaglieri onto the board, and it is destroyed. It then shuffles an 18th into your deck. When that 18th comes back out, that 18th When you deploy it, note, when you deploy it, it is not a destruction effect, will shuffle a 9th Bersaglieri into your deck. When you play that 9th Bersaglieri, in addition to the 2 other ones that you might be running already, and it is destroyed, it will add an 18th Bersaglieri into your deck. When you deploy that 18th Bersaglieri onto the board, it adds another 9th Bersaglieri into your deck just for deployment. Right. I'm out for the moment because I've played around with these cards. I'm going to pass over to Core to give both thoughts and ask any relevant questions because, yeah, this one's a lot to take in.
Yeah, so these are some of the most powerful, most pushed, most overpowered, overstated cards that will absolutely see zero meta-relevant play. These cards are undeniably incredibly powerful. The stats on these are incredible. A 4-cost 5/6 guard is very, very, very above rate. And a 3-cost 1-up 5/4 with the Blitz is also absolutely ludicrous.
Yeah, so what I will say very quickly is if you hop back to the first ever, I think it was the first ever episode that we did on this, I did do a teeny little bit of slightly naughty foreshadowing during that video in which I did mention, God forbid we ever see an ally unit with bond. How powerful would it have to be a limited number of cards you can run in a deck with a keyword that makes you dependent on having those cards to not take potentially devastating damage? And the answer is ridiculously, bonkersly, insanely. Yes, you are correct. These stats make no statistical sense in the game at all. But anyway, I'll let Core talk a bit more, but there is a reason for it.
Yeah, so again, these are some of the most pushed stats we've ever seen on cards at these costs. These are incredibly competitively statted, but it all falls apart when you read the word bond. Now, the issue with this, particularly with Italy, I think Italy is like the biggest, like the minor nation that's going to suffer the most with trying to maintain its bond, because Italy really struggles with early game units that you actively want to play in your deck. So, for example, if you're playing the full Bersaglieri package, right? You're playing all 3 copies of 5th, you're playing all 3 copies of, or all 2 copies of 9th, and you're playing some number of the RM. That's taking up at least 5 to 9 slots of your ally, which means you only have 3 slots left over for non-bonded Italian cards to activate your bond triggers. Now, when you look at Italy as a nation, its best early game units to activate your bonds are either the Semavente, the recently buffed Semavente, or the 4/3 heal guy. Those are like the 2 best standalone Italian units you can, in theory, run. You do have things like the Baby Fiat, the 1-cost 1/2 that gains +1 attack if you've got more units or whatever, and you have the Machi, but those are pretty much exclusively played in like hyper aggro or air, and the Bersaglieri don't really fit that archetype. So you end up in this situation where you have these ludicrously powerful bond cards, but you have no way to safely deactivate the bond. And then the second issue with these cards is the 2 main deck units you get to run in your deck, the 5th and the 9th, are destruction effects. Which means when you draw your 18th, you are not going to have an Italian unit on the board for the bond trigger. So the fact that the 2 main deck ones, the 9th and the 5th, are destruction effect is really what makes this kind of unplayable. The fact that they have to be dead and off the board to get the payoff, which also requires you to have an Italian unit on the board, you're taking so much bond damage in this deck, or like with this package. And yeah, you could say like the RM can draw you the 18th and heal you for 6, but that's not going to be enough, because you're taking at least 4 to 5 triggers of bond damage just getting the Bersaglieri out into play. And healing 6 is not going to offset that much fatigue damage, because with Bond as a whole, you're only really comfortable taking 2 ticks of Bond damage. So the first tick for 1, the second tick for 2, and at a push, taking 3 ticks. That's 6 damage from Bond. Because if you take 4, that's 10. That's half your starting health gone, just on Bond triggers. Not taking into account your opponent attacking you or taking burn damage or anything like that. So I do think, like, I think if you're playing the Bersagliere, you're not playing the boat. You're not playing the ship, I don't think, because you need to have enough ally slots to have units to activate your bonds. But then also, if you're committing to the Bersagliere package and you're committing to the having the units to fulfill the bond, it means you're skipping out on all the incredibly powerful Italian orders that are like the primary reason you play Italy. So you're not playing Attack in the Colonies, you're not playing Dagger Strikes, you're not playing Spring Offensive, which has amazing synergy with these because they're all 4+ attack.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where the issue lies, is that you just don't have enough standalone good Italian units to trigger the bond on. And if you are going all in on the bond, you're not playing any of the incredibly good tempo Italian orders to go alongside them. So this is kind of where the wheels fall off this wagon. It's way too much work to get it to work out. And again, you have the ship to draw the 18th to heal you for 6, and if you are playing the 4/3 heal guide, these will all proc a 4 health heal. But it's too much deck space for too little payoff, I think. I will say, out of all of these, I do think the 9th Bersaglieri has a non-zero chance of making its way into some decks, particularly the one home I could think of a deck that would like this stat line at this cost is Germany, Italy, mid-range, because Germany really struggles for 3-drops as a whole. It has got very few 3-drops that you actively want to run. So maybe you do slot into Bersaglieri, the 9th Bersaglieri, into that deck just as a 3-cost 5/4 blitz body. And whatever else is just the destruction and all is just gravy on top. You don't care about taking the 1 bond damage off the 9th Bersaglieri, because that's kind of the only bond unit you're going to be playing anyway, because a lot of the German bond cards aren't that great. So you're not going to care about that. Plus, it's going to be Germany main, so you're going to have the German US to trigger your bonds. So I do think that out of all these cards, 9th Bersaglieri might make its way into a tempo deck here or there. But I think the rest of the package is just completely unplayable. Like I said, the biggest issue with this package is their destruction effects, which means they have to be dead to get the triggers. And you can say, oh, I can play my 9th on 3, and then I can play 5th, and I won't take the bond damage, and then I can have my 9th die, and I can draw the 18th on the next turn because I'm that good at the game. I will just immediately draw the 6-drop, and then I can play it and not take the bond damage. But at that point, you're just in magical Christmas land. That's not how card games are going to function 90% of the time. So, yeah, it's like I said, incredibly powerful cards. Very interesting design space. Very cool to see them experimenting with bond on ally cards. But I just think the destruction effect, the combination of the destruction effect of the bond and the fact that it's in a nation that just does not have the early game units to satisfy the bond requirements. If these were French, we'd be having a very different conversation, because France has very decent early game with dragons and with Gracier, for example. But Italy just does not have the early game ability to activate these consistently, which I think is going to kill this entire set of cards. Yeah, like I said, I think 9th has the opportunity to maybe make its way into a couple of decks, maybe some of the 4-attack matter stuff with Germany as well. And I do think the boat, the ship, Bersagliere, I think that also has an outside chance of seeing play in some niche decks. You could do some very funky things with this in Brit Italy with co-belligerence. It's co-belligerence a thing, and then use Bersagliere to draw it and heal yourself. There's some niche outside applications for the ship, but yeah, as a whole, I think this is pretty dead on arrival.
I have to say, before I get into largely agreeing with you, there are people who I can hear typing as we're recording this, and it therefore means that I have to use one of Core's favourite, I think at the moment, trigger words or trigger phrases, and point out, but Core, what about Fortunes of War?
I knew you were gonna mention it. I didn't want to say it when I was like ranting that if anyone mentions Fortunes of War, no, you're not playing these with US as your main nation because that was like the first place I thought of was, oh, US Italy, maybe you play them in US Italy. No, because you already have enough 3-drops in US that you want to be playing over the ninth Bersaglieri. That's like going to hurt you if you try to play it. So no, these I don't think go anywhere near US.
I don't disagree with you, but we wouldn't have gotten the rant if I hadn't have said it. Like, legitimately, I think it's interesting. And there are things I like and things I don't. I like the actual destruction cycle mechanic representing, because I happen to know a bit about the history of the regiment thanks to a previous Italian friend of mine. That's a different story. I think it's very interesting to have them represented in that way. But I sort of wish we'd seen a less overstated version of this printed without Bond, because I think Bond is next to impossible to implement in allies in a balanced way. Because you only have 12 cards, and you don't want to be using all 12 of those cards to go all in on something unless the payoff is incredibly strong. And that is, I think, the biggest issue with this. I do sort of agree with you that the ninth might see some play, but one of the things that I think is going to hold it back, even from the decks that might want it, is the risk of, after it's destroyed, drawing what is effectively a permanently dead card in your hand, because you run the risk of ending up with an 18th that you're never going to want to play because of the Bond and no way to deal with it. I'm kind of sad, because I think they're a super interesting historical regiment. I think it's a super interesting mechanic with their... I'm not normally a big recursion fan, as many people know, but this was an interesting way to go down the recursion route. But I don't like the Bond part. I think the Bond part pretty much kills it stone dead. Someone out there is going to play with this. I know they're going to, because they are big, beefy stats. But the only way I could see this working is if you could have a main nation that had a truly ludicrous amount of healing to let this payoff work. And that feels like you're then dependent on, and there isn't an early card. There isn't a, 3 cost. Yes, I know, but it's 3 blitz, which means it's turn 4, not turn 3. It's a 4-drop, and that is just a little bit too late to activate the package that's going to win you the game, unless you're playing control. But if you're playing a control deck, what the hell are you running these for anyway? Especially in Italy, where if you're playing a control deck, can I point at basically every Italian order?
Yeah.
But anyway, we won't go round and round the houses, but I think both of us are on interesting, but probably just too self-destructive to be good.
Yeah, I think if they really wanted to make these playable, they should have flipped it. So it should have been the 5th and the 9th should have been deploy, and then 18th should have been destruction to shuffle. I think it would have made a lot more sense, but I'm guessing they would just wanted to temper the speed at which you could go for RM Bersagliere to get the 18th.
That becomes the big problem, doesn't it? Is how fast can you then cycle, and is there any way to start cloning effects? Especially then, I will also say, if you've done it that way, there is the issue with the deployment effect and the new German bounce mechanic. Somebody somewhere's going to figure out a way to just keep printing, as inefficient as it may be, and that is another way to look at it. I mean, even if they just made the 9th the deployment and the other 2 destruction, like 2 guards destruction and then the blitzer deployment, I think it would have been just a little bit better. Yeah. It's just a little bit... It's a nice cooking idea, but I think, unfortunately, it kind of hits Italy in general, because it means that they're basically their big thing. This expansion is an experiment that probably isn't going to go anywhere. Speaking of allies, we're moving to another allied nation, and this one has a reputation for being a little bit more consistent with the quality of its cards, shall we say. This is a Finland card. So this is Decoy Tactics. Decoy Tactics is a 3-cost standard order, and it says, give a unit ambush, shock, and enemy discards a random card when they target or attack this unit. Core's face tells me that I'm going to let him talk first, because I think he might have some things to say about this.
I despise this design space. Like I'm going to give something two very, very powerful keywords. And also, fuck you if you try to interact with it, by the way. The fact that this is a when, not an after trigger as well, is even worse. This means that even if you destroy the unit or you suppress it, it will still trigger because it's a when. It happens as soon as you point anything at it, not an after like the German elite. So you don't even have the not like you're not even safe in the knowledge that I can just duress this and not have to worry about it. No, this will always, no matter what, force you to discard if you try to interact with the unit. And even then, if you try to trade it out, it's got ambush. You're at least like 2-for-1ing yourself, plus the -2 in hand. Yeah, I hate this design space. I hate this card. I think the only saving grace is they printed it at 3, so it might not see any competitive play, given that the other Finnish cards are probably better on race. But yeah, I absolutely despise this design. This will probably be insane at lower ladder, and obviously ludicrous in draft, but God, I hate this. Like, objectively hate this.
So, I have quite strong opinions on this card, and they come from my position as being the newer player advocate in this game. For a good while, many new players have already been finding it deeply frustrating running into the Germany-Finland discard package, because it's just an unfun archetype to play against. Whether or not it's good or competitive becomes much less relevant when you're not talking about post-field martial play and with experienced decks and good collections. Against a limited collection, the sheer level of frustration that it can create is a negative experience. This card doesn't need to exist. This set of effects for me in combination doesn't need to exist. It is such a powerful combination, and yes, 3 is quite expensive, but I kind of wish it was actually 4 cost.
I wish it was 5.
At 3, this is still a really good on-rate effect to drop on a decent body, especially if it's got a high attack, because ambush is already incredibly difficult to deal with. And then a lot of the time, you're trying to deal with other threats, and then if you're discarding, like this whole discard a random thing, we don't need more discard synergy. We just don't. There's plenty of it out there already. Unfortunately, this is probably going to be a 4 of in the Germany-Finland discard deck, even if it's not actually good enough in my purely mathematical assessment to rate being a 4 of. I think it's going to be simply because of how incredibly annoying the effect is against people who aren't teched against it, and the fact that it punishes you for dealing with it. If only this only triggered if the unit survived, or something similar. But the fact that you just the number of new players who are going to misread ambush because they do already, accidentally attack with something that won't survive the ambush, and then discard a card playing into this unit. It's just a miserable experience. And again, Finland the continued reputation of Finland just not getting bad cards. Because even though I don't think it's going to see competitive play, I cannot point at this card and say it's bad. Because have you read the text? And why, in the name of all that is holy, while I'm on a rant, why is this a standard card?
Yeah.
I could see this just about at rate as a special. Maybe. But as a standard card. Anyway, I don't want to overly hang on to this, because I could talk about my issues, and I know Core could talk about his issues too. We both, I think, we don't have our third opinion today, but, I'm sure J. King will throw his opinion up. I'd be surprised if it dissents massively from ours on this. I'm not loving this Design Space 1939. I'm really not. Moving back to Germany, having spoken about Finland, Germany, this is a German elite. So this is the Ace of Spades. Once again, I'm putting an earworm in your head. This is a 7-cost, 1-op cost, 8/8 infantry. And it says, deployment. Deal 3 damage to an enemy. Becomes veteran at the start of your turn. Right. The veteran version is the same body with the same stats and the same everything else, except it gains guard, and at the start of your turn, send all units to hand. Right. PSA bear time, because it's been asked and it's been answered. Yes, that includes itself. So you play the Ace of Spades. Your next turn starts the Ace of Spades veterans. The next turn starts, everything on the board goes back to hand, including the veteran Ace of Spades. If you then play the veteran Ace of Spades out the next turn, and the turn after starts, everything on the board, including the veteran Ace of Spades, goes back to hand. Yes, really. Before I go, Core, the Ace of Spades.
This is difficult to evaluate, because on rate it's a 7-cost 8/8 that deals 3-minute enters. That's not bad. I mean, this can point face, which is relevant to note, considering that's kind of Germany's thing right now, is burning you while also developing giant things. So you play this, you deal 3 to something, kills it, then past turn your opponent can kill this because it's an 8/8. They can't even attempt to kill this, because if they can't kill it then and there, it just heals the damage off anyway. So then the next turn this flips, and then it's an 8/8 guard in the support line that your opponent then has to chew through. And if they don't chew through it, if they can't even get through it, then there's no point, because it's going to bounce everything in the hand anyway. So this, it's because it's such a delayed bounce effect. You're spending 7 credits, but 3 turns for a Leopold, essentially for a 2-sided Leopold. I don't know if it's going to be good enough. It's going to force very, very awkward board states, and this is technically, if you squint, technically it's a win condition, because you can just repeatedly burn your opponent and then every 3 turns reset it. So it's a very interesting card, and it's a card that you have to immediately kill it, either the turn it comes down or the turn it veterans, because after that the game is over, I think. If this isn't removed within the first 2 turns, and it has to be removed in the same turn because of the way it veterans and heals itself. So it's super interesting. It's a really interesting card, and it's undeniably a powerful card. I just don't know if it's going to be quick enough compared to the other things Germany's able to do right now. It's likely going to slot into the Germany-US ramp deck as a replacement for Albenfestung for the time being, just because that 7-drop slot is now open. So maybe it's fine, maybe it's not. I don't know. I'm not entirely sold. It's the delay on the bounce effect is what's throwing me off.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion on this can be summarized kind of quite easily with, do I think it's good? I'm so not convinced. I actually think it's mid at best. Do I think it is unnecessarily annoying for both players at times, but specifically for the poor opponent who watches the game delay out? Yeah, I really do, because 7 cost indefinitely postpone the game every turn is just, oh God, you have to answer it or it goes on forever. And this is not, you're right, this isn't going to get played on turn 7. This is going to get played way earlier than that, because the only place this lives is in a ramp or some form of credit cheat deck. I will say this, I am so grateful this card doesn't have an even cost.
Yeah, no, the more I look at it, the more I'm erring towards the side of this, just like, no, it's like bad.
I think
cost, 7 cost 8/8 deal 3 is like fine. It's 7 cost 8/8 destroy a thing, like destroy a medium-sized thing for the most part. And like, the problem is it's so prone to suppression, right?
It's true, but I mean, at the same time, in the current meta, does Germany object to 7 cost, 3 damage to face?
No, I don't think so. And like, I mean, compare this to like 5th Rangers, right? In the Germany-US deck right now. Like 5th Rangers, you can play it as a 4 cost 8/8 that operates for 4. I mean, you're happy enough to do that in the late game, so you're happy enough to play a 7 cost 8/8 that burns your opponent for 3 in the late game? Like, probably.
This is my biggest thing. Like, I think my biggest objection to this is I don't think it's actually going to see play as intended, as like this weird counter bouncy bounce, whatever the hell this bounce archetype thing is. I just think this is going to see play as a 7 cost burn card in the Germany burn control deck, because it's 7 cost, deal 3 damage to face with potentially a control upside.
Yeah, I think the only place for this is in like Germany US ramp. I think it's like very. I think this is the definition of like mid. I think it's too slow to see play in like traditional control. You'd much rather just play Leopold. So yeah,
but I
think this is just a ramp card.
Yeah, and as has been pointed out by our third member of the triumvirate in this discussion, like German control really is just masquerading burn at the moment, and they're not going to object to having yet another access burn tool. I, on the other hand, bluntly, 1939, I do object to them getting another 3 points of damage to face, because they don't need it. They had plenty already. But I'm kind of sad, because interesting design space for a regiment, which if you go and look into the history of them, there's a whole thing there. I'm sure there are people who were hoping for a lot more from this. Anywho, moving on, we're going to shift eastward. We're going to go to the Soviets. And we are going to arrive at the 178th Guard Rifles. 178th Guard Rifles is a standard infantry. It is a 2 cost, 1 op cost, 1 for guard. And it has destruction. Add an 89th Infantry Regiment to your support line. Core, what do you make of the 178th?
It's actually not bad. I just to clarify, I don't think this is gonna see like med relevant play at the higher ends of ladder, but for like bottom end of ladder, this is very, very good. This is like a decent anti-aggro unit. This is 7 health worth of guards, because the 89th is the 1 cost 1/3 guard, I believe.
Yeah, I'll pop it up on screen, but just for those who do tend to listen in more of a podcast format, 89th Infantry is the 1 cost, 1 op cost, 1/3 standard vanilla guard.
Yeah, I do think like at the higher end of things, I think Soviets have enough good 2-drops with like the 2/4 heal. They've got the there's other 2-drops that I can't think of off the top. It's been a long day. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
But Like I think the top end of ladder, there's enough good 2 drops in Soviets that you're not going to really care about 178. But at the bottom end of ladder, for players who might not have a full collection, who might not have all the best cards in the game, I think this is just a decent anti-aggro unit. I don't think it's going to see play in anything else other than like slower Soviet decks, at least slower budget Soviet decks. I can't see myself sliding this into mid range, and I don't think I'm playing this in aggro. I think there's better 2 drops for aggro to be running. But yeah, it's a solid card, decent for the newer players for sure.
Yeah, it definitely falls into that selection of cards that I have not been objecting to see in this expansion. I've actually very much, as a side point, I've personally been quite happy to see in this expansion quite a lot of decent value standard and limited cards that, while they may not see a ton of meta play, like this does give an option for a more budget Soviet delay or control deck for newer players, because it's a lot of stats for not a lot of cost. And that's not nothing, and guards can be difficult to deal with. Do I think it's going to see any kind of competitive play? Nah, I just don't think. I think there's going to be a handful of maybe niche delay decks that somehow want to try and leverage it. But for the most part, I'm pretty sure all of those attempts to leverage it are going to be quite limited.
I will say that this is a very good piece for the Brit Soviet guard deck. This with Oxford is pretty good.
That's true. It is. I mean, to be fair, it is a good rate guard.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it might see some like experimentation in maybe like tier 3 decks. I just don't think it's going to crack the top meta game. It's definitely like it's not a bad card. It's a solid card. I just don't think it's
you can't look at it and point at it and say this card is bad. Whether it's competitive or not, you still can't get away from that's a really good amount of stats for very little investment, and it replaces itself with another good amount of stats effectively for free. It's not half bad. Right, so moving on to something maybe a little bit heavier, we're going to arrive at a Soviet elite. This is the Soviet IS-2 1944 early. This is a new Soviet elite tank. It is 10 cost, 1 op cost. It is a 7/7 bond shock tank with heavy armor 2, and it has destruction. Add 2 40-second rifles, give 1 guard, and the other shock. Right. So. Ah, dear. Where to begin with the PSA? Firstly, let's talk about 40-second rifles. 40-second rifles is the 3 cost, 1 op cost, 3/4 limited Soviet infantry that has ambush. At the start of your turn, fully repair this unit. Right, because it's been asked, this was not an easy card to actually print effectively, because internationally Cards is printed in many languages. Many languages that aren't English use words that are in fact, Core may be familiar with this. There are languages that use words that are a lot longer than their English equivalent. And there is a hard limit to how many characters you can hammer onto the formatting of cards, which is, of course, hard-coded into the game and very expensive to change. So, because people have asked, with big capital letters and question marks and all sorts of stuff, add 2 40-second rifles where? Like everything else that does add, the default, unless it tells you otherwise, is that it will add them to the support line. No, this is not going to put a pair of ambush units in the front line. That would be ridiculous. Than some Soviet elites. I had to put the last part in there. However, having then, obviously, the 2 that you drop, one gets guard, the other gets shock. Clearly, those are powerful keywords. Core, let's talk IS-2.
I think this is a thoroughly mid-elite.
Come on, Court, you can't say that. Soviets don't get mid-elites. Everybody knows this. Soviet elites are either cracked beyond belief or terrible.
I think we might have the first instance of this, like, fine elite in Soviet. I think this might be the first one. Like 10 credits, 1 op for 7.7 heavy armor 2. Like, the also Stalin, like, that's already in the game is a 10 cost 1 up 8 with heavy armor 2. That has an effect when it's bounced to hand. That already the original IS-2 is like already a decent body. The main reason like you're drawn to the IS-2 is that it is a lot of stats for very little op cost. The 1 up on these on the Stalin tanks is like the big draw to them. The fact that they're so easy to operate. It's just like when you compare this to other things you're doing at Soviets at the same credit cost, do you really care? It's slow. It doesn't have blitz. Like, I think the Shock T-34 is just better 90% of the time. You're also spending 10 credits to like blitz that into the front line and attack. And like it's got heavy armor too, and it's got shock. It doesn't lose shock, so it like presents a much more frustrating threat in the front line than this does. It's like 1 less attack and 1 less heavy armor, but who cares? I don't know. I just feel like this is very expensive for what it's doing. And yeah, the 40 seconds having guard and shock with ambush as well, like that's very, very good, but this has to die, which means your opponent is like, you have to understand that like this is not happening. This is not dying until at least like turn 11, right? So that's like super late. And would you run this in Soviet control? I don't think so. I think you've got several better elites that you would run over this. You're already most likely just playing front formation as your win condition, so why do you need the IS-2 as like a little bit of extra value? But I don't think you're struggling for value elites in Soviets. It's like particularly if you're playing like Soviet Italy, you've got plenty of stuff from Italy that's doing a much better job at like sealing up games in this, like the big matches, for example. So I just don't know. I just don't see it. I mean, the only place this really makes sense is maybe in like Soviet mid-range, but do I think Soviet mid-range wants to be playing a 10 cost 7.7 tank? Probably not. Again, Soviet mid-range, you're going to be better served playing the elite T-34 and just getting in with blitz damage essentially. So yeah, I just don't think this is really fits anywhere. And yeah, it's got 2 combat keywords, and when it dies, it spawns 2 things with 2 combat keywords, which might be relevant at some point, but I don't think like it's 10 credits. It's 10 credits is the problem, right?
That is the big thing, isn't it? Like this concept, this idea on a smaller statted tank with maybe a less potent spawn for its destruction effect might be.
If this was like 8 credits, I would like happily jam this, but at 10 it's just too expensive.
Yeah, I think the only way, and I'm not suggesting we should ever do it. You're out there. I'm not suggesting we should ever do it. I know it's the 1939 tradition, but the only way that this would ever really become appealing at this kind of design is if it had blitz, and that would be stupid.
Yeah.
Like, it's just too big, too expensive, too slow to really find its way into any major meta decks, in my opinion. That said, it does not reach the "this is a totally unplayable trash elite" category, so it is possible that we are registering the rarest of rare things. A decent, frankly, moderate Soviet elite.
If this was in the US, this can you imagine? This would be like a solid US elite.
Yeah. But it like in the nation that it's dealing with, it's just Soviets. I'm sorry, Soviets have so much better to do with their elites. Soviet elites are plenty good enough not to care about this.
Yeah. Again, like if I were to play this, it would like the most I would pay for this exact card is 8 credits.
I think you're probably about on rate. I don't think anybody wants to pay more than that. I'd probably pay 8 credits for this and have it be slightly less bad, or lose the destruction effect, or have the destruction effect tweaked a bit so it's less potent. But as it's
Bond,
like with Bond and all of that, it's like, oh god. I suppose clearly it's aimed at the keyword super deck, but we all know where we stand on that so far.
Yep.
So let's hop along, and we're not going too far away because we're going to arrive in Poland. And Core's face. Poland. Let's see what we've got for you now. Poland, we give you the 2nd Infantry Regiment. This is a 4-cost or 1-op cost standard infantry. It is a Soviet exile, for those who are wondering. And it's a 5-4, and it says deployment. Get the combat keywords of target unit. Right, PSA time. I'm sure Core's been waiting for this one. Because I don't know why people ask this. No, get does not mean steal. It doesn't mean take them off that card, give it to this. It just copies the keywords. It doesn't wipe them off. It doesn't do any of that, because that would be ludicrously strong and very annoying. However, in some ways, there's part of me that wishes it did do something ludicrously strong and annoying, but I'm going to pass it over to Core, because I'm really struggling for Poland right now.
Why does 1939 refuse to give Poland like a cohesive set of cards in any given expansion? Why are they like all like we had 2 clone cards? Why couldn't they just give us another convert piece to synergize with what Poland is already good at, which is converting things? Why do we get what is exclusively a Soviet card wearing Polish clothes? Why did they use the 3rd Polish slot to give us an unplayable Soviet card? It's so frustrating. Like they could have very easily just printed this as steel, and it would have maybe seen play because it's essentially a suppress attached to a thing that gets the keywords. That would be cool. We had that in Legends on several cards.
Yeah.
But no. Also, like the tech, why couldn't they just say copy the keywords? Why did it have to be get? Why consistency? Why is there never any consistency? Oh my god! This is the type of thing. This is just what really annoys me about like how they write the text box. There's like 1939. If you're out there, I charge a modest fee. Let me just introduce an amount of consistency to your effects text, please. It's not even that they didn't have space; they had plenty of space.
I wish you fortune, but I will say they already have access to some professional writers and designers, and I am right there with you. The text on this bugs me. I do understand though why the guy in the picture looks so miserable. God, this is just. It's not necessarily just that this is bad. It's that this is bad and it's not in its home. This is so clearly a Soviet card. Like, it just... I know it's Soviet exile before anyone starts with me, but this is... You could have made this a Soviet card with Polish exile. That would have been fine. But... It would have been useless, but it would have been fine. Regardless of historical context, and I haven't gone and looked it up, and I know I have lots of Polish viewers, and if you do understand why the 2nd Infantry makes sense, like, I'm sure there's a reason it makes sense as a Soviet exile, but the text, the effect, the whole thing, this is just a really indifferent 5-4 body.
Yeah.
And it's sad, because it could have been... And this is another ally slot doing basically nothing.
Yeah. Poland got 0 cards this expansion. They got nothing.
Yeah, it feels really harsh. And again, my Polish, I am sorry, because I was hoping for more. But yeah, we're going to move on because there's not a lot more to say about you, my friend. I just feel for you. Moving to another allied nation, and one that so far has been, shall we say, headed in a different direction. This is Finland. This is a Finnish special card. We will do our best to compose ourselves, but I promise you, it's not easy. This is the Finnish special Coastal Battalion 7. It is a 4-cost, 1-op cost, 2/5 infantry that has ambush, blitz, and units you deploy get +1/+1 for each combat keyword they have. Right, I'm going to do the PSA because I've been typing it repeatedly. I can't remember when I started because I'm lost in the release schedule. Many of you will have noticed I'm handling some of the releases at the minute. But no, this is not a deployment effect. It does not have a big bold word saying deployment on it. That therefore means no, it does not get its own buff. The buff only triggers if something is deployed after this is already on the board. I hope that's clear. The next Coastal Battalion 7 that you play would get the buff. The first one does not. It just comes down as the very disappointing 2/5 ambush blitz infantry it is. I don't have words. Core.
It's just the whiplash of going from the 2nd Infantry to Coastal Battalion, just the night and day difference between cards that are unplayable garbage and then Finnish cards.
Oh, God.
Like, it's... The saltiness about the Polish cards aside, this card is very, very, very good. This reminds me a lot of Samoa in how this operates, except it's not limited to the first thing you deploy each turn. Yes, it doesn't affect the op cost, but who cares? You're in Finland, you can just play Lotus Fard, which is already an incredibly powerful card. So yeah, this thing is like ludicrously powerful. It comes down a little bit late in the game for some of these decks. Like on 4, you're playing this, you're not necessarily getting value out of it straight away. But if you're playing like a mid-range or tempo deck, playing this on 4 and then turn 5 deploying a 3-drop and a 2-drop that are each getting like +1/+1 or +2/+2, that's good enough. And Finland has no shortage of units with multiple keywords. Like, again, the 3-drop, 3/3 blitz shock infantry that draws you a card. That's going to get +2/+. It's going to be a 5/5 for 3 under Coastal Battalion. So yeah, this card is very, very, very powerful. Again, I wouldn't be surprised to see this slotted into some like Finnish mid-range or Finnish tempo decks. Obviously, this goes in the Soviet Finn keyword soup deck because it like buffs everything, and you like buffing everything. And I am also assuming this is going to have the same quirk as Samoa and Moroccans has with the Ilyushin bomber. So I'm guessing when I deploy my Ilyushin, when I deploy Ilyushin and put Coastal Battalion into play, I'm assuming my Ilyushin will get the +1/+1 similarly to how it interacted with Samoa, because the Ilyushin technically does not fully resolve until the Coastal Battalion is in place, so the battalion should be able to see the Ilyushin. So
yeah, and unless that is, I will say, unless it tests that way, unless that is changed for a mechanical reason, that is currently the timing. Hey, you can have the quote for the video because it's been in all of them. Timing chart when, but yes, as is, the timing would be the same little bonus that you get with the Ilyushin.
Yeah. So yeah, very, very interesting card, very powerful card. A card I'm likely going to be doing a lot of testing with in some variations of Finnish mid-range and maybe Finnish tempo. Yeah, it's just again the whiplash of going from a Polish card to a Finnish card is just it's extreme.
It's very specific, but yeah, I'm kind of with you, and I do agree. Like, the first thing that came into my head, and it might just be because I've been cooking in certain directions recently, is the synergy between this and Infantry Regiment 36, like you mentioned. That is so strong to be able to get a deployment which this turns. So Infantry Regiment 36, I'll probably pop it up, is the 3 cost 1 op cost 3 blitz shock unit, which of course, if you've got this, comes down as a 3 cost 1 op cost 5 and then draws you a card. All right, you discard it at the end of your next. Who cares? Seriously, that is so good. Like, just on rate, this is such a good card.
Yeah.
This is just a strong turn 4 play and a really strong turn 5 play.
I do hope that they do change salvage to be a combat keyword. I would really appreciate that, because there's one card in Finland that doesn't see nearly enough play, and this might be the push it needs, which is Detached Battalion 4, the 4 cost 2/3 smokescreen salvage guy. I would love to have salvage added to the combat keywords just to have an excuse to play Detached Battalion.
Yeah, I think I go backwards and forwards on this, because from a balance point of view, with the card pool as is, I'm not convinced that making salvage a combat keyword is a good plan. I think there are just a few places where it could be a teeny bit too good. But I do get it would be interesting. I just think we'd have to be in a different meta state, like a different game state, for it to feel balanced. That's just me, the dinosaur with a very specific brain that basically runs like a mathematics machine. It doesn't pass, it doesn't scan correctly in my head that it would be balanced. I could be proven wrong, but I have a feeling that that's one of the things that held it back from being added as a combat keyword. I can't comment on whether it's been considered or not for obvious reasons, but it would make sense that at some point it had been considered as a combat keyword, and it would make sense that there was a reason why it wasn't given that. Right. Let's see if we can be slightly less whiplashed. So we're going to move from Finland to the Soviet Union. We're off to Russia again. We're off to the Soviets. And it's time for a Soviet order. This is a Soviet standard order, and this is Exposed. Exposed is a 1-cost standard order, and it says, costs 1 less if you control a US unit. Deal 5 damage to a unit with no combat keywords. So, effectively, yes, if you control a US unit, this is free. Core, what do we think?
I'm not sold. A lot of cards in the current game just have a bunch of keywords, like incidentally, like they'll have randomly ambush, or they'll have shock or blitz, for example. So this has nowhere near enough targets to be worth playing unless you're in a very specific metagame. I will say the nation with like the highest density of good targets for this is pretty much Germany. Most of the German ramp late game tools all die to expose. Things like Schwalbe, Leopold, the Henschels the Henschels die to it. So there's like some targets in very specific nations that it does interact with. But for the most part, I don't think there's going to be anywhere near enough targets for this to be justified. You could make the argument that you can suppress a thing and then expose it, but like that's 2 cards to remove a thing when you could just, I don't know, play like daggers or an actual piece of removal on it. So
I mean, I've got to be honest.
I don't think it's going to be.
My biggest issue with this card is it exists in a meta where we have rush.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, you could play rush, you could play extended barrage instead of this. Like, there's far more consistent pieces of removal that do not rely on your opponent playing keywordless cards, or that don't rely on being set up by expending another card to suppress it already. So yeah, I don't think this is going to see any play. It's an interesting card for sure. Maybe worth experimenting with in very specific metagames, but we are not in that metagame right now.
No, I mean the only things that I can see this being kind of interesting because of the US synergy is it does have an interesting synergy with the M10A1 in that if you're using the M10 to clear to suppress a big threat, then you then get to do free 5 damage to that. But I just think that's not worth the card slot. That's my biggest problem. I don't think it just doesn't rate a slot in a deck when you have better things to run. And I think that's going to be its biggest problem. But I do agree. It is interesting design space, and it is another example of that classic Soviet highly red-focused art that was around during World War II, which I'm not going to complain about either, because I've got to do my occasional bit of art critiquing. All right, so punting along, we are off to the aforementioned United States of America, and we arrive at Spars. Okay, so first and foremost, I know people have asked this. What it stands for is Semper Patris, which translates, it technically stands for Semper Patris - always ready. The nickname, the Spars, came to the women's reserve regiments in the United States, and they got the nickname based on the motto of the US Coast Guard, because the US Coast Guard was the recruitment point for the women's reserve in the US. The US Coast Guard's motto is Semper Patris, which means always ready, hence Semper Patris - always ready, hence Spars. There's a little tale for you from history, and I personally think it's interesting, but I also, because loads of people have been like, what on earth is this about? That's what it is. So, learning time with Bear for those of you who didn't already know. Right, Spars is a 1-cost limited order, and it says, choose one. Draw the top unit of your deck, or give it ambush and shock. So once again, we see the shunt for the US as an ally in this multi-keyword idea, and yet Finland exists. I'm just saying. But I think this is interesting. I just don't know if it's good. Core, what do you make of this?
I don't think it's good enough to see play. There's interesting things you can do with this. Like you could play a very unit light version of US and just play Spars to draw your handful of units. Like if you're playing very specific things, or if you're trying to combo. Like this gives you a lot of tutorability in that sense. I just the fact and like ambush and shock are two very powerful keywords. It's like particularly in conjunction, because it means that you kind of have to attack into it, but the ambush means that you're, no matter what happens, you're losing an extra unit to either the ambush or the shock. So
yeah,
that like both sides of this are interesting and in a vacuum quite powerful. The problem is the giving the top unit of your deck ambush or shock is very random. You can't control it unless you like set it up with a night patrol, but like that's extra. That's just like another piece on top of that. Like you don't really want your cards to be reliant on other cards to be good.
Yeah.
A lot of cards you want to include there, they should be like okay on their own. They just shouldn't like rely heavily on something else to be considered decent. So the fact that it's like random, you're not necessarily going to draw it immediately, like the ambush shock unit. You're not going to draw it necessarily because it could have like 2 orders on top and then the unit. I just don't think it's good enough. Like I said, there's interesting things you can do, particularly playing like low unit counts. You could very easily tutor for specific things, but I don't think this is going to make it as a staple in any deck. As far as like archetypal synergy cards go, it's like not bad. I think this is much better than something like Hidden Plans, for example. I think this does a much better job at like supporting its archetype. I just don't think it's going to be anywhere near good enough to see play.
Yeah, I will say I do think if this said if this was exactly the same but said or give it blitz and shock, this would be the home for almost every OTK cooking lunatic in the world. And I know you're all out there, and you know how much I actually love you because the cooks out there really interest me. But as it is, it just ends up being kind of a very long walk to a very indifferent payoff, unless, as you say, you set it up in a super specific way. And I don't think we're living in a meta where you have time to. Like I've seen, by the way, in Magic the Gathering, as I'm sure you have, some very good hyper tutor focused decks that will thin an effect to very specific targets with very specific things. But that's a very different tempo of game. And I don't think in cards we are, certainly not at the minute, living in a meta where you've got time to effectively fanny about like that, trying to set up the one thing that will probably win you the game. Plus, I don't think these, in their specific combination, are what I would call game-winning keywords. I think there are combinations of keywords that you would want to see more on this effect. And obviously, 1k, draw a card, even if it is fixed, get the top unit of your deck, is just not good value. We know this. We know it's not good value. It has to have a decent kicker. Like, this is competing with For Freedom. And I know this is limited and For Freedom special. But the difference is night and day. From a purely mathematical point of view, the difference is huge. Yeah, it's a bit of a shame. But we shall move along. Right, declaration. I'm going to let Core do a lot of talking here because the next 4 cards were revealed by yours truly earlier on today, as of the day of recording, in a cool video that you can find on my channel. I was personally quite proud of it. I had a bit of fun playing around with it, but we're going to move to Britain for the next 4 cards. And the first card is a card that I know people have been asking to see in the game for a very long time. This is Home Guard. Home Guard is a 1-cost British order. It's a standard order, and it is bond, deal 2 damage to target unit, add a garrison to your hand. Garrison, and it will be relevant as we go through these, is the 1-cost, 1-op cost token. It's a 0/3 guard that says at the start of your turn, deal 1 damage to the enemy HQ if this unit was not attacked this turn. Right, Core, what do we think of Home Guard?
I find this card very hard to analyze because historically 1 credit deal 2 damage to a unit has not been that great. We've seen it on occasion, through the breach and whatnot, but frequently it's not good enough. It doesn't have enough upside to see play. 1 cost, deal 2 damage to a unit and get a thing, that might be good enough to see play, but then it's slapped with bond, and then I don't know if bond is going to kill this card or not, because ideally there's a few places you could play this, right? You could play this in aggro as cheap anti-aggro removal for mirror matches where you're playing against Japan Soviet aggro and they're deploying 1 and 2 health creatures and you're just home guard your thing while also developing your board. There's an argument for it in that. It also gives you a guard to help protect your support line or other squishy things you have in play. Also gives you a little bit of burn damage from the garrison pings. Then most obvious place for this is control. But in control, do you really want to play this on turn 1 against your aggro opponent, taking the bond damage while, yeah, you get the garrison, which is a decent guard for turn 2, but you're paying 1 for the garrison, so then you're in, potentially floating a credit on turn 2. And, in mid-range, there's probably, maybe an argument for it, but I just don't see it. Maybe this goes in, the bond mid-range deck that I've been thinking of with the Valentines, the Mustang, and the King's African Rifles. Maybe that's it's good enough for that deck, but I just don't know. You also have to consider that the Pompadours is going to be a thing, so on occasion you'll just be randomly healing while you're playing these bond cards. Yeah, for me this is very difficult to wrap my head around whether or not this is going to be good enough, because we've seen multiple early game deal 2s not be good enough to see play. but like this might be just good enough to make the cut by giving you the 0-3 guard, but it might also just like not be enough. Yeah, this one's tough for me.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree. I mean, obviously, I've done a chunk of testing with this card, but I can't talk about that. But what I will say is I do think you are right. It needs to find the right home. It needs to find the deck where it works, and it does something productive, and that means it needs to find a deck where Garrison has value. Now, are we going to see that deck? We don't know yet. We certainly haven't seen much support for it so far, but it's interesting to see a Garrison procking card suddenly appearing kind of out of nowhere with Bond slapped on it, which will smoothly lead us on to the next card reveal that I did, and this is the Middlesex Regiment. This is a 1-cost, 1-op cost special infantry. It is a 1-3 guard, and it has deployment. Add a garrison to your hand. Here we go, Core. So what do we make of this one?
First and foremost, I can't believe they added sex to cards. That's crazy. Confirmed sex update.
Oh, God help me from the children. I was dealing with them in Discord earlier.
But as far as cards on rake go, this is like fine. Again, like the garrison, I don't know how much like value to attribute to the garrison, because if the garrison was just a card in the collection, you would never play it. As it is, we have like Cheshire Regiment, which is like a doubled up garrison, and that like doesn't see play. So like having a 1-3 that gives you the upside of giving you a 0-3 guard for 1, is that good enough? Probably not, but like the Brit deck right now is looking for cheap infantry, and this is a cheap infantry. So I think
one thing I feel obliged to point out, because it doesn't necessarily come across from the quick read of the card, there is something very notably, and I think quite importantly, missing from this card, and that's the word bond.
Yeah.
This is a British 1-drop infantry that does not have bond.
Yeah. What I was like getting to was that I think the Brit deck, like the Brit bond deck and the Brit mid-range deck, and maybe even like Brit control, like this is the 1-drop you're ideally going to be opening over like Welsh guards or buffs or whatever, and this certainly takes the place like over lay force every day of the week, because this triggers all your force. Like, yeah, such a bad cards. But this is like your ideal turn 1 infantry, I think, to enable all of your, like, if you deployed a Brit infantry last turn effects. And it gives you another Brit infantry to like set up the Brit infantry stuff later in the game, which I think is like the idea of the garrisons, is just to give you a cheap infantry to trigger your things later on. So yeah, I mean, it's probably fine. Like my closest comparison point in other games would have been like Markman in Tessel. Markman was a 1-cost 1-1 that gave you a 0-cost 0-3 guard, like just added to your hand, which was like great in tokens because you had effects that cared about having cheap creatures and creatures in both lanes and stuff. So like that's my close comparison point. Markman was great in very specific decks. I just don't. I do think it's going to see play. This card is going to see play. It's going to see play in the Brit mid-range deck. Likely going to see play in the Bond deck instead of Lay Force, like I said. I just don't know if this is going to see play in Control. I don't think it's going to see play in Control. I think you don't care about your 1-drops in Control as much. I think you much rather care about your mid game and your board clears. So yeah, I this will see play. It's going to see play, like I said, in the mid-range Bond deck, I think, as like an activator.
So. I mean, I can 100% guarantee you that this will see play live on some streams, but that's only because I know for a fact I'm going to be playing this card, because this card goes to as yet I'm undecided on whether it's good or not, British deck that I'm very excited to play around with. However, speaking of cards that play around with this British infantry thing, we move on to the third of my reveals, and this is the Baltimore Mark III. So the Baltimore Mark III is a 4-cost, 2-op cost limited bomber. It is a 3-4 bomber, which is kind of on rate, but it has deployment. Deal 3 damage to an enemy unit if you deployed a British infantry last turn. It also, by the way, has very pretty art, so I was very happy to reveal it. Core, what do we make of the Baltimore Mark III?
I think this is actually like pretty good. I think you play this in control. I think you play this in like the Brit mid-range deck. Yeah, just like a decent unrate bomber body. Like this is like decent stats for a 4-drop bomber. As far as like bombers go, normally 4-cost bombers are like around 3/3 that way. But this is like a 3. Like this is the way this reads is like, oh, you played like a garrison plus like land girls last turn, and then turn 4 is this is just a 3/4 that blows a thing up and then threatens to continue controlling the board for the rest of the game. This reads to me like pretty solid. I think it's, like I said, going to be a decent shout in like the mid-range deck and maybe see play in the control deck. But we'll see. I like this one I could be wrong on. This one I think is like on the fringe of being playable. I just don't know if it's going to be good enough. It's an interesting card, and I think it's like a solid card. Definitely going to be like very good at lower ranks, and definitely going to be solid in draft. It just might not be as good as we want it to be in like high ladder.
Yeah, I think so. A fringe reference time, but I think this is the definition of a damn fine cup of coffee. It's nothing special. It's not doing anything big and flashy and oh my god, this is so powerful. But then it also doesn't have Bond, so it's not going to be going in that direction. We've had our big Bond aircraft, and my god, did Britain get a big Bond aircraft. This is just really decent on rate. Like, we've said endlessly, like when Pound came out, we've said endlessly that Britain in many forms, and Air was its most playable deck at the time, has always been looking for decent targeted removal. This is targeted deployment removal a good chunk of the time if you're playing the infantry, which presumably you are, because that's kind of where this sits. Although I kind of agree with you. I think it also sits in control. I think it's a little bit more awkward in control because of the conditional trigger. But then it's also a limited card, which is really good, again, for newer players. This is just going to be a good value card to have in your deck. I personally am a fan of this. I think it's going to be interesting. I don't know if it's going to be competitive, but then I'm not sure it has to be.
Our closest point of comparison for this is the Elite Mosquito that got rotated. The 6-cost 2-up 4/4 that deals 3 to a unit. Like, which I'm think like if the Elite Mosquito was in the game, would I be running it right now in like brick control? Maybe, because it's like not a bad effect and the body's fine. Would I be playing the Mosquito if it cost 4? I absolutely would be. Would I play a Mosquito that costs 4 and requires like a little bit of setup? I think so. I think it's worth the setup. It's competitively priced. It's decent stats for a bomber. Dealing 3 is like very, very good versus other mid-range and aggressive decks. And if you're playing Brit control, you're likely playing Brit infantry to set up for your forward observers and stuff anyway. So like, yeah. It's tough to say. I think this might just about make it, but I could be wrong. It could be like just not good enough.
I think that you've used the phrase "on the bubble" quite a lot before, and I think this is a card that fits that edge point. It's going to make some decks. I just don't know if it makes every deck. Right, so it's time to go to my final reveal, and I am going to unashamedly say this is a regiment that I have been waiting to see in this game for a very long time. This is the Polar Bears, also known as the 49th East Riding. The Polar Bears is a 2-cost or 1-op cost standard British infantry. It is a 1/3. It has Bond, Fury, and deployment. Gets +1/+1 for each British infantry you deployed last turn. I also want to say this has a truly stunning piece of art that comes from someone who clearly wanted to spend some time dealing with it. I love the fact that it's got the East Riding logo on it. Just, you can look and it's right there on the tank track. I've been excited to have this regiment in, but I'm interested, obviously, to break past that and talk about how it's been implemented. Core, what do we make of the polar bears?
It's not great. It's a shame because it's a sick regiment, but yeah, I just don't think it's gonna. I don't think it's good enough. 2 cost, 1 op, 1-3 is like mediocre. It's got bond on it, which is like a pretty big detriment, and Fury. Like, Fury doesn't really do anything on infantry for the most part, unless your name is buffs. And then the deployment, get +1/+1 for each British infantry you deployed last turn. That is all well and good if you're not playing exactly cards, because you can only deploy 4 things to your support line. So, like, you're limited in how many infantry you can deploy. And it has to be specifically British infantry. Has to be, like, that's two specific things. How many British infantry are you running in the bond deck? I don't know. You've got the garrisons, you got the guys that generate the garrisons. Maybe you're playing Welsh guards, but like, it's just at the point in the game when this is coming down. It's coming down as like a 2-4 or a 3-5, and it's like it takes a couple of turns to get going unless you like kangaroo transport it. But if you're playing kangaroo transport on it, you're just like, why not just play it on buffs instead, which is much less work. So yeah, I don't think this is good enough.
Yeah, it's like, obviously I'm going to be playing around with this. Have you met me? But and I think it can fit in a British mid-range deck just as decent body. I actually think this in combination with Middlesex Regiment can give you a very, very solid like turn 1 through. So if you can get Middlesex on turn 1, then you can kind of you can get something else on turn 1. If you can get like Middlesex and then deploy the garrison on turn 2, then this comes down as a 3-5, which is pretty decent stats. I just don't think the Fury is relevant. I know why it doesn't have Blitz, because that would be ridiculous. But at the same time, I kind of sort of wish it had something like that, because the problem is that it's a good trading body in a deck that I think can do things faster, and it's trying to compete with the Valentine, and unfortunately the Valentine is just so much better than this. And it makes me sad. It really does. But I still think it's interesting. I still think I'll play around with it. I still think there's some fun you can have, like high rolling this with some kangaroo transport just because you feel like being insane. And I like the fact that you have to work a bit harder, because I've been on record as saying that I think the problem with buffs is that buffs is just a very silly piece of card design because of the way its effect triggers. If you're going to have multiple kind of self-buffing. But why couldn't this just have been British units?
Yeah.
Just a little bit of a buff for the Bears, please, 1939. I would like to see this be a playable card, clearly. But yeah, sad face, but understandable. And that brings us to the end of my reveals. Moving on, it is time to head back to some more cold climes. From polar bears to polar climates, we are headed back to the Soviets, and we have arrived at the 573rd Rifles. The 573rd Rifles is a 3-cost, 1-op cost standard card. It is a 2-3 with Blitz, Bond, and Destruction. Add 2 16th Rifles to your support line. Core. Oh, I should say 16th Rifles. It'll pop up on the screen. 16th Rifles is the you'd be forgiven if you didn't know what it is. It is the 1-cost, 1-op cost special that is a 0-1 smokescreen and says at the start of your turn, gain +1/+1. Anyway, Core, what do we make of the 573rd?
This is a fantastic card for newer players. Just being a 2-3 that on death gives you two two things in the support line that grow over the course of the game. This is exactly what like low ladder kind of is all about. I know that like for a lot of players, 16th rifles does a lot of heavy lifting early on in their ladder climbs. So having
Oh yeah.
access to a bunch more of them is like no bad thing, I don't think. So yeah, I think this is going to be a great like new player and starter card. I don't think it's anywhere near good enough to see play in actual meta strategies or even at tier 2 or tier 3. But yeah, it's neat to see it. I do like giving like throwing cheap decent cards to newer players, things like this that give you like a lot of value for not a lot of investment. So yeah, I like it. It's just not going to be it's not going to be played anywhere outside of like low rank.
Yeah, I think the only other place that this would be an absolute menace is if you ever get any pauper play. If you were pauper limited, this is also really good value.
I do want to say as well, this is going to be very, very good in draft.
Yes,
because this is exactly what draft is all about. Just having, you're more than happy to have like things that grow in the support line in draft until they're good enough to move forward. So this is going to be very good in draft as well, I think.
Yeah, and getting it on a halfway decent blitz body just doesn't hurt. Like on the whole, this is not a super exciting, super meta card, but I think it is a healthy card for the game, in that it definitely is a good thing to have in your collection when you're newer to the game. I think many new players will be very happy to have this card for a good long while on their climb towards Field Marshal. I think the 573rd is going to do a lot of hard work. So these, by the way, this was another community reveal. Ogogogon, shout out. Popping to the next reveal, that reveal was the 740th Rifle Regiment. 740th is a 6-cost, 1-op cost limited infantry. It is a 5/6 infantry with ambush and bond, and it has deployment, develop, Arctic convoy, burning sky, or the hammer. Right, this card is kind of the definition of value and versatility. So Arctic Convoy is a 4-cost Soviet order. It's normally limited, and it says draw 2 random units from your deck. Burning Sky is another Soviet order that deals 4 damage to a target enemy air unit, and the Hammer is a Soviet order that deals 6 damage?
6 to a ground unit.
6 to a ground unit specifically, yeah. So, and that is another 3-cost order. So when you play this, you get the option to develop one of these 3 specific. So one thing I will say, develop with a fixed pool. You know the 3 cards you're going to see. Regardless of anything else, I am so here for that. Anyway, Core, interested to hear your thoughts.
So I do have like an immediate comparison point for this card, and that is from Hearthstone. They introduced what were known as like the gifts in Hearthstone. So each class got a gift. The gifts basically functioned exactly like this. It was all the gifts were 1-cost spells that when you cast them, you pick one of 3 like class specific cards. And then if you don't cast that card, you discard it at the end of the turn. This obviously you don't have to discard it at the end of the turn, but every class got one. Every class had like that. Each one saw varying amounts of play. Like to this day, I'm still playing the Warrior one. It's just that good. But where this falls down is it's expensive. You're paying 6 for this.
Yeah.
It's a 5/6 with ambush. It's also got bond, which is a drawback. So yeah, like the question is, are you happy paying 6 to then pay another 4 or another 3 or another? I think Burning Sky is 1 or 2. I want to say it's 1.
I want to say it's 1. I'm just checking, but I'm pretty certain. Yeah, it is. It's 1 cost.
Yeah, like it's nice to have the flexibility. Like what's great about the gifts in Hearthstone is they are flexible. Most of the gifts usually have like an AoE, they have a single target, and then like a little piece of value. So like for example, the Warrior one has Execute, which is destroy a damaged minion. It has Brawl, which is an AoE that leaves a thing alive, or it has Shield Block, which is draw a card, gain 5. So like it's nice to have the flexibility that it's not necessarily going to do only like you're not playing it for exactly one option. You're playing it because at least two of the options are going to be good, and maybe the third option is decent in a niche scenario. This meets all those criteria. So the hammer is usually pretty solid removal. Arctic Convoy is a nice little hit of value, and Burning Sky is very useful in the niche scenarios. It's just the cost is what holds this back. If this was like 5 or 4 with like slightly worse stats, then I would like automatically be jamming like 2 or 3 of these in control, or like in maybe like 2 copies in mid range because you like the extra flexibility. But at 6, I'm not sure if you're running this. I just don't know if this is like good enough for you to consider including in Soviet control. Again, it's the price tag on this is the sticking point, not the effect. The effect is great, and the fact that the develop pool is like very obviously like curated is great. This is how they should be doing develop moving forward, by the way, is just have a curated selection of develop cards.
Please be listening, because I think we're both going to sing from the same hymn sheet, having lived through different types of it, particularly in Hearthstone.
Yeah.
Fixed pool is the way forward, because not only does it give you consistency in your deck building, because you know what you're building for, it also kills the edge cases of just trying to exploit it. I think the other way that this could have been different, in my humble opinion, is if this kind of stayed at 6 cost, but had lower attack and got guard. I think control would look at this very differently.
Yeah, it's a solid card. Don't get me wrong, it's a solid card. If it was in any other nation, I would probably be like chomping at the bit.
Yeah, but unfortunately, this is like
Soviet.
Yeah, and they have a lot of very competitive, strong control cards at this cost, and around this period of play in the game. Soviets do not lack for late game. That said, again, I will say this is not a half bad tool to have if you're trying to build an early, cheaper control deck as you're climbing the ranks, because even though it is 6 cost, when you're climbing, you can usually extend a game out, especially if you use a lot of guards and removal, and this could give you that last piece of kick. But I do wonder, and I have to say it, is it me, or does this just not need Bond?
Yeah, this is like, if this was like 4 or like 3 cost, then yeah, slap Bond on it. But at 6, no, Bond is completely unnecessary. And I don't think Ambush justifies the Bond either. I think as far as the keywords go, if this had like maybe, if it was like Blitz, then yeah.
Yeah,
if it
sure,
had like Shock, if it had Shock, maybe, but Ambush, no.
Anyway, we're going to hop to a Soviet elite, and we all know how entertaining these can get. And this is Motherland Calls. This is a 3-cost Soviet elite order, and it says add a Soviet unit. Add a Soviet unit with destruction in your deck to the support line. Give it blitz. Destroy it at the end of turn. Now, this takes a bit of unpacking, because this effectively does 3 things. It tutors you a possibly quite curated unit. It gives it blitz, which some of them lack, but not all of them. And then, at the end of the turn, of course, it destroys it, which will trigger the destruction effect. Core, what do you make of Motherland Calls?
This is a really interesting card. Now, it's important to note that this is not a copy. This pulls the actual
card,
deck. Yeah, it's drawing a card and playing a card for 3 and triggering its destruction effect at the end of turn after it's swung, potentially. One thing that is bothering me is how this card is templated. Add a Soviet unit with destruction in your deck. It should be from your deck.
Yes.
That's just... They have space on the card to add the from, I'm just saying.
Yes, I do think from would have been a better word, although you say they have space. They have space in English. I don't know whether part of the reason here is that it took us over the... Because I haven't followed all of the card texting, but I don't know whether it took us over the brink in a couple of other languages, because this card is a lot of text.
Yeah. But as the card itself actually goes, I think this is decent. There's not that many targets for it, is like the thing to remember. The two best targets for this are going to be the Illusion IL-10 and the Ac-9, the two aircraft. So you've got the 3 cost 1 up 4/3, that destruction adds your last destroyed ground unit to your support line, and then you have the Ac-9, which just draws you a random Soviet card from your deck.
Yeah.
Those are like the two main targets, and both of them are decent targets. You're paying like the same rate to tutor and play the Illusion, give it Blitz, so you can operate for 1, or you're getting a 2 credit discount on the Ac-9 and then paying 2 to operate it, killing, most likely taking a table thing, and then drawing another card on top of that. So yeah, I think this card's like solid. It really just depends on what other Soviet destructions we get. Like we saw this with air supremacy as well. They printed like some stuff that functions with Soviet destruction effects, like out with the old. It triggers the Soviet destruction effect and then converts it. But we just haven't been given any destruction effects.
Yeah.
Is the thing, like outside of the IL-10 and the Ac-9 and like maybe Chaika, like that's your pool. So
yeah, because
unless we get another target, I don't know if this is going to be good enough. Maybe it is just good enough with the Illusion Yak-9, but like most decks are not running Yak-9 in general. It's a little bit too slow, despite the fact it's like a decent mid-range unit.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I do want to do one quick PSA, because I know it's probably going to come up at some point. I know there are going to be people who start pointing at 36th Cavalry. I have to make two very important points. One, 36th Cavalry, it technically has Blitz already, but two, the version that you get from this will not. 36th Cavalry has a deployment effect. This is adding it. If you target 36 Cavalry with this, you just get a 3/3 with a destruction effect in your support line, and it will give it Blitz, but it won't come as a 6/6. Just in case you want to try that and you get very disappointed when it doesn't work, you're not deploying the unit, you're adding it. And that is quite important. Anyway, sorry, I forgot to do that at the beginning. So sorry, Core, I interrupted you.
Yeah, I mean, on 36, this just ends up being 3k, get 2 3/3s in your support line for the most part. So yeah, like it's a good card. This is a very, very good card. We just don't have the pieces to support it just yet. Again, I'm hoping that we see some more Soviet destruction effect stuff come out, like ideally more aircraft, because again, out with the old will make 0 sense if they don't print a single destruction aircraft in Soviet.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, very powerful card, is just kind of waiting for the tools to manifest.
Yep. Well, we have got one last Soviet card, and indeed for this video, one last card. This is the final reveal from that pool, and this is Persian Corridor. This is a 2-cost special Soviet order. And it says, give a friendly British or US unit destruction. Trigger all destruction effects of your Soviet units. Right, PSA, I can't believe I'm even having to say this, but I know I'm going to have to, so let's get it. Even Core is laughing. You can interpret this as liberally as you like. It's only hitting the Soviet units that are on the board. No, this does not trigger all of the destruction effects of every destruction unit in your deck. That would be ridiculous, and the only game I know that has come close to that is Hearthstone, and it was a terrible idea there. Anywho, with that understood, which I would have sort of hoped was anyway, Core, how do we feel about Persian Corridor?
So, I'm gonna look at this at 2 halves. So, first of all, like, if you ignore the top line attacks on this card, if you just ignore that entire first line, the destruction trigger all destruction effects on your Soviet units is incredibly powerful. So like that is like really, really powerful for this like Soviet destruction effect deck, but we have like no Soviet destruction effects.
That is a lie. I'm looking at the pool right now. We have Soviet destruction effects. It's just we don't necessarily want to trigger.
We have 10 destruction effects, and we only want to use 3 of them. that says a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, so, in all seriousness, yeah, he's not wrong. Unfortunately, a lot of them are very disappointing.
Yeah, this is, again, like setting up an archetype that does not yet have the targets similarly to air supremacy. Was very much hoping that we would see targets this set, apparently not. So, are we just going to keep getting destruction effects for Soviet units, like cards that interact with destruction effects, and they're just never going to print Soviet units with destruction effects? Is that where we're going? I mean, again, the 10 cost Stalin, they do this card and the last card work with the 10 cost Stalin. That is something to consider.
I mean, let's be honest, I have to call you out on this. They work with the 10 cost Stalin, by which time you should really have won the game already.
Well, I mean, if you're playing Motherland calls and you just fire it on turn 3 and you get the Stalin.
I mean, I suppose there is a world where you build the deck that only includes the 10 cost Stalin with a destruction effect for the specific tutor.
Like you're playing, I think you've got 2 targets, which is like the IL-10 and the Stalin, and what you're hoping is that you draw the Stalin, and then turn 5 you Motherland calls or you draw the Ilyushin, then turn 5 you Motherland calls. Get the Stalin, you've got 2 credits left over that you can operate the Stalin with, so you get in for 7 damage in the front line. And then it destroys itself, and then you get the 2 dudes, and then you play your IL-10, and then you out with the IL-10 to get another Stalin, and then I think that's the magical Christmas land we were trying to live in.
Yeah.
You just don't know if that's good enough.
I mean, if it works, it's definitely good enough, because that's brutalizing. But I think, like you say, the problem is that it's happy magical Christmas land in a very inconsistent deck.
You're relying on drawing 3 very specific elites in a very specific order, which is just not how card games work, because variants will take every opportunity to screw you over, as I know well. But yeah, the other half of this thing of Persian Corridor specifically is it's pigeonholing you into Brit or US ally. I don't know why that's a thing. I don't think there's any particular synergy with Britain and destruction effects, so that makes 0 sense to me. Why that's I know you could just say, oh, it's for historical reasons with the Persian Corps. I don't care about that. I care about the effect on the cards in the card game. They could have called this anything else and given it a different effect.
I will say, because someone's going to say it in the comments and they're going to be completely right. Yes, the reason is historical because of the name of the card, but that doesn't mean that you have to print this effect on that card to then end up pigeonholing you into, as Cora is saying, British or US, which is just... You want this to say, if nothing else, you want this to say Japan.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, again, like historical relevance, but it's an order. You could have named this anything. You could have called this John. You could have just named this John and given it a different effect.
Right. Yeah.
Like, this is where I'm like confused as to why they've done this. Like, the US kind of makes sense because you've got like Fortunes of War before anyone else says it. Like to go with the destruction effect stuff, and like you're getting a handful of destruction effects in the new US set. But like, if you're playing US destructions, you're playing US main because the professionals is a destruction you want to trigger, which means you're not playing. Like, why do you care then in your US main deck if you have a card that you can only play on your US units that then triggers the destructions on only your Soviet units? So this card to me makes no sense from bottom to top. It's just, I think it's just like unplayably bad. Like, the destruction effect trigger all Soviet destructions is very, very powerful, but it's like sandwiched in this absolute nothing burger of a card.
I will say, I do think that had this card got the elite symbol on it, it would be restoring balance to the universe with how just Utterly, I can't disagree. I do not see a good case. I'm not saying I don't see a case. I'm sure people will make one, but I don't see a good case for playing this card.
Yeah, I do just want to say I do apologize for not like seeing the IS2 synergy with Motherland calls quicker. I just wasn't thinking about it. I think that's like the only other destruction effect we've seen this set anyway. So like maybe I'm just going back to Motherland's Call real quick. Like so like maybe I think Motherland's Call is like a little bit better than I was initially. Like we do have a little bit extra support, so maybe you do just play this in like a weird mid-range deck where your targets are IL-10 and the Stalin, and sometimes you play this on turn 3 or turn 5 and just blow out your opponent out. So yeah, I mean, I think Motherland Call is a little bit better than I gave it credit for initially.
Yeah, I'm also not going to lie. I test this Gubbins and I still hadn't. I had not gotten to that as a plan. It just hadn't occurred to me. I think because I'm not that player. That's a big part of it. Is the whole tutory combo gaboomy boom thing is just very not me.
It's like a slightly more sideways gambit in a weird way.
But yeah, I think unfortunately Persian Corridor is a pretty disappointing card. Yeah. Just sad face. I can't really help you. However, that brings us to the end of another 24 cards, if my counting is correct. And I know for a fact that as of recording date, Core's going to be back tomorrow evening to record another big pile of cards with me, as we try desperately to make sure that I keep my record of getting reviews out for all of the cards while living my life, getting some sleep, and actually dealing with the chaos that is my home at the minute. So a massive thanks to Core for hanging out and having a good chat with me. As usual, it has been a blast. It's been a lot of fun. We've had some good cards. We've had some indifferent cards. But I think mostly we've just had a blast. I hope you've enjoyed yourself. And please let everyone know where they can find you and what they might be expecting to see from perhaps you, but without me stuck in the same video in the near future.
Yeah, so you can find all my stuff on YouTube over at CoreData. Links will most likely be in the description. Or I normally post decks every Saturday or so. And once the set comes out, I'll be doing a ton of brewing around a lot of very, very interesting stuff. So expect a lot of videos on cards and decks from the new expansion. And hopefully I'll get some streaming done in the next couple of weeks as well.
We can but hope. I am with you on the hoping myself. Right, that's it. That is part three, I think part three of the coverage for Homefront, and we are on course to get it done in 4 parts, which I wasn't convinced about as ever. We hope you've enjoyed it. We hope it's been useful. Thank you all for being here. Take care of yourselves, and we will see you in part 4.